We live in a world where everybody is searching for meaning. We live in a postmodern world which is dominated by technology, the internet. And I guess, it flags up that fundamental question, that fundamental existential question. Who are we? And what is this all about anyway? Do you know? Well, I believe that poetry is at the heart of that questioning. Would you believe if I told you that there's a poet in everybody? Now, I know people think that's a load of rubbish, right? But I believe that everyone can write poetry. Often, a lot of people feel that poetry is inaccessible to them because of the education system, where poetry is attributed to great writers like Shakespeare or Dylan Thomas. Well, actually, and because of that, people are made to believe that, well, if there are poets in our contemporary world, it's a very elite minority. Well, I am a poet, and I also believe that everyone else can write poetry. I've developed a new methodology called transmorphic hermeneutics. Now, it sounds very academic, but in actual fact, it's actually quite simple in many ways. It involves 7 steps. And basically what it is, it just enables the participant in my workshops to access that poetic resource, which I believe is innate in everybody. So what is great poetry? What's the essence of great poetry? I mean, we've all studied poetry at school, haven't we? Right. But I believe the essence of really great poetry is not just the meaning, but it's the sound of language. It's that beautiful lyrical quality that's part of the poetic medium. And it's that sound, it's that beautiful poetic quality. It's almost like a transcendental characteristic. And you know what? We all have access to that. But the only thing that's blocking us is a lack of self-confidence. So the point of my workshops and the point of transmorphic hermeneutics is to break down that barrier and allow us, and to build up that self-confidence and allow people to access that poetic resource within themselves. So I'm going to give you an example of, what does it sound like, this beautiful, really, lyrical, musical quality of language. And a good example is Dylan Thomas, A Refusal to Mourn. So I'm just going to read out a little excerpt from this poem. It says, "And I must enter again the round Zion of the water bead, the synagogue of the ear of corn." Now, a lot of you are thinking, what is he talking about? I don't know what that's about. Well, I'll tell you, what he is actually saying, in a very simplistic way, what he's saying is, look, lads, as they say in Ireland, he's saying, death is an impossible thing to talk about, and religions don't do it right either, so religions don't help. Now, he could have put that in a very simplistic way, couldn't he? And there are a lot of poets out there who write very simplistically and would do that, but he doesn't. And I'm going to read it again. This is what he wrote. "And I must enter again the round Zion of the water bead, the synagogue of the ear of corn." Isn't that absolutely extraordinary? The pure music of it. Would you believe, I believe you can write like that? I believe everyone can write like that. And I know I've been shut down by a lot of poets for saying that it's almost sacrilegious, but I do believe everyone can write like that. And as I said, it's about self-belief. So, before I talk about transmorphic hermeneutics, I'm just going to go a little bit back into what this kind of poetry is about. It's very much connected to experimental poetry. Experimental poetry really started up in the late 19th century. In the mid-19th century, the likes of Darwin, the origin of the species, he debunked creationism, when he said that we didn't descend from Adam and Eve. And also you had Friedrich Nietzsche, who said God is dead. And then throughout the 19th century and into the late 19th century, because of advances in science as well, people started to realize that God isn't the center of the universe, and maybe God doesn't exist. So that induced a lot of insecurity in people. So in terms of art and literature and music, there was a reaction to that. So a good example is Stéphane Mallarmé in the late 19th century. He developed a thing called chance poetry, which is just basically, Stéphane thought to himself, well, look, right, he said to himself, without the Irish accent, he said, if there is no God, then there's no meaning to life and there's no meaning in language. So he started to do this, he developed this language play called chance poetry. After World War I, this was developed by the Dadaists. Now, World War I was, man's inhumanity to man. Impossible atrocities occurred during that war. Well, again, you had another aesthetic reaction from the arts, from music, from literature, from all kinds of groups who just couldn't deal with the level of immorality that humans were capable of. So you had a group called the Dadaists, who basically, again, in reaction to the fact, well, if God doesn't exist and humans are capable of that kind of atrocity, then there's definitely not only no meaning to life, but there's no morality either. So they developed nonsense speak as well. So all of these poets, all of these political poets, developed all of these strategies, which had a major impact on poets like Dylan Thomas, and had a major impact on 20th century modern poetry. So I'm going to talk about the first step in transmorphic hermeneutics. Now, I did this with some people outside as well, so thank you, Julie, who participated. That was wonderful. So basically, what it involves is writing with the left hand. When you write with your left hand, you're appealing to what they call the right-hand side of your brain, which they call the creative side of your brain. But it is where that resource, that innate resource that everyone has, a poetic resource, is inherent in that space in your brain. I know you may find that hard to believe, but it is true. And this is a very good way of opening up that resource inside of yourself. So I'm just going to give you an example. Now, this is going to be a bit strange, okay? But just trust me, it's quite extraordinary. And please do try this at home. So I'm just going to walk over here to the board, right? And I'm just going to write, what this involves is it involves just writing the first thing that comes into your mind. Right, so I'm just going to, I always start off with pink tomatoes. I have no idea why, but I'm just going to do that anyway. Here we go. Pink tomatoes, it's very hard to write with your left hand, by the way. Blue head, and the black wire of the... Now, even as I'm writing it, I'm already getting the words in my head. It's very hard to catch up with myself. Pink tomatoes, blue head, and the black wire of the heart. It sounds a bit mad. But if I sat and tried to write that right now, I couldn't. But if you look at that, there are possibilities there to capture beautiful language that you can integrate into a poem. Again, you've got that beautiful lyrical quality that's there, and everyone can do this. Actually, I tried this with some people outside already, and these are the results. Black tie face star, today and always on my mind, black dog trains, paninis, pinatas, on treetops, green grass of love. Now, I think that's got real potential. And that comes from three people who participated in the exercise. So then we come on to what we call step 2. Step 2 is what I call walking the metaphorical pathway. Now, this is a very unusual method, and this is one that I developed over the years. And this involves basically, I know this is a bit strange now what I'm going to do, but this is actually what you're doing. You're walking a line inside of yourself. Does this make sense? We all have two worlds, a physical world and a metaphysical world. And when you're doing this particular exercise, you're actually walking this line between these two worlds. And by walking that line between those two worlds, you're walking the path of the artist, the path of the poet, which is you. Right? And so what this exercise involves basically is I just get people to, this time, rather than writing random ideas, I got people to write down basically, say we focus on an object, say if it was the moon. I'll give you an example. Say if we have a moon. As you see, I'm a great artist as well, there's the moon. And so I get people to write down the physical attributes and the metaphysical attributes of the moon. So the physical attributes would be that the moon is round, that it's white, all those things. Metaphysical attributes is that it sounds like an echo, it's silver, and that it's associated with madness. Right. Now, what I would do is I would get people to write all the key words. There could be 50 words they put together. Now, they're in a group doing this. I get them to write down the key words and tear the words up and have the words on a single piece of paper like this. Then I get them to roll them up in their hand and then throw it in the air like that. I call it toss in the air exercise, right? And then what they would do, they'd get down on their hunkers, as my mother used to call it, get down on their hunkers and play with and manipulate the words. Now what they're doing, they're manipulating the words to find rich language to describe the object. So they could find a word like, say, silver white echo. Now, is that a beautiful way to one lady did that in our workshop. Silver white echo. Isn't that an incredible metaphor to describe the moon? And they wrote a whole series. Every workshop, people write a whole series of pieces like this, and they are amazed at what they were able to do. Even Julie there, who's participated in our workshop, she was amazed at herself. She's an accountant. Is that right, Julie, wherever you are? Yes. But it was extraordinary. And I'm going to give you, and we did this outside already, with, as I said, with some participants. And instead of using the moon, we used TEDx as an object from which people could sort of come up with some ideas to describe in beautiful, lyrical Shakespearean language. And this is what people came up with. Shining windows, red dawn people, vision air share, lily calling ideas, speak city love, calling humanity, shining ideas, vision heart sound, sense of place, heart people. So again, beautiful, beautiful images that describe what TEDx is about in beautiful lyrical language. And people did that in 5 minutes, which is quite extraordinary. And I said, and again, they were quite amazed at themselves. So what's the significance of this transmorphic hermeneutic? Now, there were the first 2 steps, by the way. As I said, I won't go into all 7 steps, but I will mention the last step there in a minute. But before, I'll just tell you a little bit about transmorphic hermeneutics. I developed it when I was in Ireland years ago, teaching different writers' groups, different methodologies of how to generate poetry and that kind of thing, and building up confidence in people. Then I moved to this country in 2008, and I was doing my doctorate in Swansea University, and I worked with the adult education department, and I worked with groups there, and again, I developed it through those groups over the years. And I'm currently now, I'm a senior research fellow at University of Wales Trinity St David, and I'm currently using this methodology with some of the postgraduate art students, and it's having a major impact on them as well, because it's helping them to visualize conceptually as well, which is quite extraordinary. So it really is an extraordinary thing, but what I loved about it more than anything is that this methodology has had an impact on people from all different walks of life. So, for instance, in the groups that I worked with at Swansea University, all the different adult groups, I had people ranging from 20 to 80. And yet what happened within each group is that suddenly I suppose it would be that the breakdown in language somehow reflected the breakdown in social barriers between groups. And people suddenly were open, a sense of openness happened. And people suddenly saw new dimensions, not only to themselves, but to people around them within the group. And this transmorphic hermeneutics enabled that to happen, which is quite extraordinary. And then, of course, that was reinforced with the impact of step 2. You have people down on their hunkers, like their inner child would come out, and down on their hunkers, playing with this language, coming up with this rich language. It's almost like the beautiful, transcendent, lyrical quality of language that they were playing with. Somehow, it enabled them to transcend something in themselves and created a beautiful openness. It was quite extraordinary and quite a privilege to be part of. And I could give you 2 examples of that. When I was 2 examples of groups that really were very successful in this regard. We had lots of successful groups out of it. But one group that's very personal to me is who started with me, a group of people, some of them in the 30s, some of them in the 60s, came in 2009 to one of my workshops, and they continued coming for a number of years, to such a degree now that we're just a very close-knit group of friends who meet up to write poetry. But it's almost like suddenly we don't see each other's age. We're from different generations, but somehow that's all been transcended because of people's utilization of this particular methodology, and it's had a wonderful impact. I've also used it as part of the civic exhibition at the Mission Gallery last year, which involved a group of architects who worked with artists and a writer, which is myself. And I had the great privilege of giving a workshop at the Dylan Thomas House there in the Uplands here in Swansea, to architects and artists. Now, traditionally, architects and artists don't get on at all. 2 different things altogether there in terms of design, different ideas about design. But what was extraordinary is you had imagine trying to get an architect to write a poem. I mean, that was hard. But I'm telling you, it was an extraordinary experience. You had architects who never wrote a poem in their lives, writing incredible, beautiful, lyrical lines, and suddenly you could see it in their faces. They were so chuffed, and they had transcended something in themselves. And suddenly you saw there was a wonderful sense of openness between the architects and the artists, which was a very profound experience. The final step, though, I'll jump all the 4 subsequent steps, and I'll go into the final step. The final step is where everyone, after all the exercises in the workshop, all the participants then would be encouraged to write a poem. So they'd have to pick pieces from each of the exercises and see if they could collate some sort of a final poem. Again, this is quite an extraordinary experience because you're at that stage where everybody has gone through all of these sort of emotional shocks and their ability to write this beautiful stuff and to share that with others. And then now they're in a situation that they're listening to this beautiful stuff being read back to them, and also they're in a space of not only sharing it, but in a space of deep listening to other people sharing these experiences too. And it was quite profound to see this. And I know lasting friendships happened as a result of a lot of those workshops as well. And also for the architects, by the way, I know that for them it had an impact even on the way they designed, visually conceptualized their own designs, which is quite extraordinary as well. But basically, as I said, what's so significant about transmorphic hermeneutics is that its success is basically in breaking down language. It broke down social barriers. And it created an openness of various different groups, and it's very, very successful in that context. So thank you.